Stone Creek store has been moved to the Pioneer Museum's historical village in Grand Prairie. Volunteers are now working to restore the 55-year-old shop.
The Pipestone store was originally located at the confluence of Pipestone Creek and the Wapiti River at the top of the hill.
The building was built in 1935 as a warehouse, actually, and then the original store burnt down in 1936, and this was made into a dwelling and store and post office in about 1936.
Neighbors and people from all over the area would use the store, as well as the Indians from settlements across the Wapiti as far away as Nose Creek. The store was actually located on the old route to Jasper.
My father traded for their furs, so they would come, usually a whole group of them, a couple of times a year.
Yates' mother came to Canada and the Peace Country from England as a war bride in 1922. She is 92 years old now, but she still vividly remembers how the store got started.
Someone from England, some relation, sent me $100 to go back to Taverback and to visit them. And there were four of us by then. There was the two kids, my husband and myself. Well, we couldn't get very far on $100. So we took it, and so I don't know why, but everyone said how nice it would be if there was a store closer. And so we decided, or somebody suggested it. Anyway, we decided to have a little store.
Frank Stoll and John Stark are working on this store. Stoll actually grew up near where the store was located originally.
There's quite a lot of pride and lots of memories and one thing and another about this store. Like there used to be quite a few meetings held here, church services and one thing and another. And
both men noted there is a lot more work that needs to be done and estimate the store should be finished sometime next year. Louise Good, Eyewitness News.
For the first
This film records two crossings of the Rocky Mountains in the summer of 1937. The first was by 5 girls, 2 boys, and a young doctor in a party of 13 guides and wranglers and 75 horses, cutting trail through unmapped country between the Fraser River in British Columbia and the Peace River block in Alberta. The second was by 3 girls, Nicholas Ignatieff, and 4 guides, traveling upstream in 2 boats from Fort St. John on the Peace River to Prince George in British Columbia, following the route taken by Alexander Mackenzie in 1793, when he became the first European to reach the Pacific overland north of Mexico. Both trips were organized by Nicholas Ignatieff as a surveying and mapping expedition for 32 boys from Upper Canada College, Toronto. And it was his idea that we girls should do the return trips home with the guides, horses or boats and equipment. The boys had started from Wembley, Alberta, with 86 horses to survey around Mount Alexander and emerged 3 weeks later at Bend on the Fraser River. They then collected 4 specially constructed boats at Prince George to take them north down the Pack and Parsnip Rivers to Findlay Fort and east down the Peace River to Fort St. John. Our party of girls went out to British Columbia by Canadian National Railway and made camp on the Fraser River while waiting for Nicholas and the boys to come out of the mountains. The film was taken by Elizabeth Me under considerable difficulties and is a far from complete record of a most exciting and interesting trip. On the pack horse trip, I had the camera and light meter tied to the saddle. In order to film, I had to dismount, tether my horse, untie the equipment, check the light, and set the camera. So often, after all that, what I wanted to shoot had long since passed. Added to these difficulties, the weather was overcast or actually raining almost the whole of the 16 days in the mountains. Not good for filming. So do make allowances. It was the first time I'd ever filmed and the first time I'd been on a horse. These maps will show our route. Map of Canada. The area of our travels. This detailed map has been drawn as we remember the places passed 52 years ago. It will not coincide with modern maps because of the great changes in the landscape in the intervening years since the building of the Alaska highways in World War II and the opening up of the area with roads. We have not been able to find the Jarvis Creek we followed for a whole week on any map, nor even Jarvis Lake on the divide from which it flowed. Modern maps show neither snowshoe nor bend. This is the Fraser River, and here is Snowshoe, a whistle stop between Jasper and Prince George, where the train was stopped to let us off with our 19 pieces of baggage. Bend, where the boys' party came out of the mountains, was 40 miles nearer Prince George. For 3 days, we followed trails cut by the boys through dense forest, crossing the Fraser and the McGregor rivers to Jarvis Forks. For 8 days, we followed Jarvis Creek, cutting trail and fording the creek several times a day, eventually reaching Jarvis Lake, 8,000 feet up on the Great Divide. From there on, we were in the foothills of the mountains, where the country was much more open. Crossing the Wapiti, we were back in Wembley after 16 very exhausting days on the trail. Nicholas Ignatieff, the organizer of the expeditions. He was one of a Russian family who had escaped from Russia at the time of the Revolution and was currently a master at Upper Canada College. He had a passion for the wilds of the Canadian West and wanted to share it with young people from Eastern Canada. Members of the party: Janet Hart, Charlotte Horner, Mary Gray, Elizabeth Gray, Elizabeth McElwraith from Scotland, we called her Spike, Jimmy Gardner, Jumbo, Jimmy Bailey, Slug. The doctor, Dr. Arthur Deutsch, we called him Butch. Bert Osborne, the outfitter of the party from Wembley, Alberta, surrounded by the other 12 guides and wranglers. It was he who collected the 86 horses for Nicholas's party. Adam, the head guide, a full-blooded Indian. Pete Campbell, he had a Scottish grandfather he was very proud of. Dan, a rancher. Bert Dalgleish, another rancher. Ray and Narcissus. Narcissus was another full-blooded Indian. Shots taken at Jasper, where we spent a day en route. I was trying out the camera. Mount Robson, the highest peak in the Rockies. The train stopped to let passengers take photos. Late evening, and goodbye to our train at Snowshoe. On the move to camp on the Fraser while awaiting the arrival of Nicholas and the boys. Snowshoe. All there was at Snowshoe, a general store and a sawmill. The local boatman, Shorty Shivers, brought us across the Fraser in his boat. Everyone was so helpful and kind. Shorty helping us to unload our stuff at the Smith's Ranch. Butch in the boat. Charlotte practices riding while we wait for real horses. Our neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Joyce, who had been panning gold all their lives in Alaska, Siberia, California, and now on the Fraser, show us how it's done. Tiny specks of gold. Hail and farewell to the boys at Bend over a meal of bear meat stew. They went on to Prince George to their boats, and we set out with the horses on the return trip to Wembley. Elizabeth on a horse for the first time, she and Honey equally nervous. 3 days on, Jarvis Creek at Jarvis Forks. Swollen with rain, the river was such a raging torrent, we had to wait a whole day until it went down and could be forded. Vince, the party's cook, and Elizabeth splitting logs for the campfire. No chainsaws in those days. Fording on Jarvis Creek. It was a skillful business getting 75 horses safely across. Often the pack horses or the foals, we had 4 foals with us, got carried downstream and had to be rescued. We forded several times a day, the stronger horses leading the weaker ones. The water was usually up to the saddle, and for a whole week we were never dry. The scenery on the Jarvis was magnificent. Glaciers, waterfalls, and misty mountain tops. Before reaching Jarvis Lake, we had to negotiate a box canyon. You have to climb to get into a box canyon and climb again to get out. It's most important to pack horses correctly. Their load must not slip during the river fordings. Janet helps Ray and is shown how to do the tricky diamond hitch. One of the foals. Finishing the diamond hitch. Adam off to cut trail. Spectacular glaciers on the Jarvis. We may have been the first Europeans ever to see them. After 8 days traveling up Jarvis Creek, Jarvis Lake at last. The lake was 8,000 feet up on the Continental Divide and surrounded by mountains. Unfortunately, a wrong camera setting obliterates this beautiful emerald color. From here, the guides knew their way. Having left dense forest behind, we were now in the foothills near the Alberta border. In open meadowland, it was easier to photograph the horses. This is Narcissus, Jumbo, Mary, Janet, two of the wranglers, Spike, and always bringing up the rear, Butch. The film ran out before the end of this rainbow. The pot of gold not shown. We had been 10 days without meat until Slug shot a moose between the eyes at 200 yards. Adam is the butcher. We had the liver for supper. A side trip to see Porcupine Falls. Possibly very few in the world had seen them. The only way down was by rope. Slug on the laborious upward climb. This is Bert Osborne, the outfitter, happy to have got the worst of the journey behind him. He had had great difficulty in collecting 86 horses to do the trip. Some horses were as old as 30 years. Some were unbroken Indian ponies. Hanging on to the horses' tails, the easy way up a steep climb. A bit of fun on Dandy. Once a circus horse, he'd been trained to rear when pulled in sharply. Pete Campbell, he had a great sense of humor. Bert Dalgleish, one of the ranchers who had brought his riding horses. Vince, our father figure, preparing for home and civilization again. He was the one who always made sure we were safely coping with the hazards of the trip. A typical supper around a campfire. Vince was a wizard at putting on a meal for 23 of us, often in pouring rain and when we were all dead tired. He baked bannock every day in a little oven over the fire. After supper, the Wranglers talked horses into the early hours, and most evenings ended with a game of poker and the singing of sad cowboy songs. An Indian family, part of a band we met living in the wild with their horses. They lived in teepees and spoke no English. They put on a Mushigan or tea dance for us around their fire in the evening. And I got the tom-tom, trading it for my jacket. Unsaddling at the end of the day. Butch on the major, an old horse who was always at the tail end. It usually took between 2.5 and 3 hours for the first and last horses to make camp. Home and dry at Osborne's ranch at Wembley. Here we are, Jumbo, Butch, Slug, Janet, Charlotte, Elizabeth, Spike, and Mary. Young Osborne and his father put on a rodeo show for our entertainment. Mrs. Osborne outside the Osborne log cabin ranch house. The hotel in Wembley in those days. The local livery, which hired out horses and rigs. In 1937, there were no made-up roads in the Peace River block. Everyone rode horses. The river trip. Kay Howitt, Kitsy Nealons, the 4 river guides, Rick, Kenny, Jim, and Walter. We traveled the route of Sir Alexander Mackenzie, the young Scot who became the first European to reach the Pacific overland north of Mexico. Here is his portrait. Simon Fraser, traveling from the Pacific up the river since called after him to what is now Prince George, followed the Pack River to McLeod Lake, where the first British settlement inland was established. Kay, Kitsy, and I traveled by train to Dawson Creek, at that time the end of steel in Alberta. From there we went by road to Fort St. John on the Peace River to join Nicholas, the boats and the guides for the homeward journey up the Peace to Findlay Forks and south up the Parsnip and Pack Rivers to Prince George. We were following exactly the route taken by Sir Alexander Mackenzie in 1793. We traveled on the back of this truck with the drums of gasoline needed to fuel the boats back to Prince George. The road, 80 miles long, was built on muskeg, and several times we got stuck in the sticky gumbo. The only people we saw en route were would-be ranchers clearing the land. Dawson Creek then was the jumping-off point for the north and had only been in existence for 6 years. We met the boys on the road, returning from Fort St. John to Edmonton and home. First view of the mighty Peace River, a dramatic sight against a background of golden fields of grain on the opposite bank. Traveling up the Peace towards the mountains, we came to the Hudson Bay post at Hudson's Hope. The inn and store. The post was at the beginning of a long portage that we and the boats were carried over, thus avoiding the very dangerous rapids that had smashed Alexander Mackenzie's boats to pieces. Getting the boats up rapids like these was a combined effort. An old man panning gold. From time to time on the river, we met a trapper or men panning gold. Several brown bears were spotted on the shore. A fun day of rest and fishing, where the narrow Wicked River joined the Peace, and the Peace churned its way through the mountains in a dramatic gorge with 300-foot sides overlooked by Mount Selwyn. It was Nicholas's favorite spot in the world. Kenny fishing at the junction of the Peace and the Wicked. An Arctic trout, one of several we had for supper. Sadly, Kenny was drowned a few months later. Trapper, who had lined both sides of the Wicked, made this contraption to get across. Kay and Walter try it out. There were many stretches of rapids like these before and after Findlay Forks. Nicholas in the bow. Many idle hours were spent like this in the calmer waters of the Parsnip. Traveling in the easy stretches. The little Indian church at Fort McLeod. The packed river approaching Prince George was very shallow. We had to pole and get out to pull, and it was called Frogging Riffles. The end of our trip. It had taken a week. 52 years on, the landscape has been greatly changed. Dawson Creek, Fort St. John, and Prince George are now sizable towns and important junctions for travelers traveling north. The Peace, west of Hudson's Hope, most of the Findlay River, and the Parsnip have all been flooded and are now Williston Lake. I hope the pictures on this and Walters. We traveled the route of Sir Alexander Mackenzie, the young
Oh, it's a sales gimmick for a door.
Wow.
Well, it's still
Hi, golly, look at there, no, that's an oldie.
I'll leave it to the museum.
Okay.
Did you carve that?
No, I could see. So,
That should go into the museum and put on a gift certificate.
okay, we'll do that.
Isn't that neat?
No, I couldn't.
You put this in the plywood.
Because I can't see that.
It's not from school in here, man.
Well,
We
would
should
you-
really. And the prune.
What do you call this? No.
For making jam.
Yeah, what do you call
A
it?
sieve.
A Chinese or rice eater. So
They-
on.
stuck?
I remember this is called a Chinaman.
Well, that's a good name for it, because rice potatoes
Yeah.
are potatoes made to look like rice, do a thing like that. But
Yeah.
we always use that to make,
Just after
We look over by that bird. See, we could buy them. You don't have any money left though, you spent it.
see?
I only had $1. I'm proud of those things that cost 2 cents.
It's those little guys.
And these pumpkins they used to sell.
Beans and peas and,
Show you what they had in the old days.
Now they have something else for promoting over that time. I don't know already welding on it, you know. Yeah.
What was it? Chocolate dispenser. Chocolate dispenser. But it comes up. Or there was. You didn't get that? Or one.
I know we've got some, yeah, and that.
I kinda remember she just cleaned the top off the stove and put the bread right on the floor. That was good.
And now, yeah, we should do, is this a terrible thing to put? Yeah, what?
I guess it'd be just cold water pumping or something. It was there, so it'd be just.
Heaters in the back of the stove.
So that's why there was a tap there. I was pretty conservative, but other fellows in my age group.
When the parents were gone.
No, the parents here. They were, like my uncle and aunt took over
No, mine's still, I'll get mine back.
I like your music.
This painting of the store, done by Vicky Hott, granddaughter of the Wattses, the original of this used to hang on a signpost out in front of the store.
Yeah, I only wanted that up there. Don't show it the darn thing.
Get a lot better there. So? Yes.
Has Granny been in to see it yet?
No.
Yeah, nice.
She was thoroughly pleased, eh?
Oh yeah. She had hands up here in that great stone.
Oh, good.
That was made special for it.
Oh,
And then it hangs up, hanging leaves. Where'd the other one go?
there's one on the end of there.
Yeah, but there was one on this end too, yesterday.
There's some
One
of it
there, one
inside
there,
with
one
the
there.
rope making machine.
No, we hung them up, rolled them and hung them yesterday. Oh, they took the little one here. They used the big one, that's what it is. They took the one off the other end.
Just stuck away somewhere, wasn't it?
Well, Dawn and them had it all back in the shed down there, the cupboard.
They had to come.
Oh, whatever. Okay.
we would like to, but right now at this point in our life, yeah, you know, like
Ray!
like we
Ray!
come put a year.
There's a lot of people that have stayed around here and have helped organize such events as this. And I'd like to offer thanks to them and introduce them. The president of the association that is responsible for this is Frank Stoll. And Frank, would you stand? I'm sure you're well known. Frank Stoll. The secretary are there, Joe and George. And now you may have noticed when you came in there was a Hudson State Library that tickets were being sold on. Now that money was donated by John St. Arnold. John, where are you at? Incidentally, from the sale of the tickets, all go to this organization, and they will help defray the cost of the meal and any other incidental costs. Your $10 was not quite enough. If there's any funds left over, it is going towards the store that was dedicated this afternoon, towards furnishing it and whatever. Another person who assisted Ethel as secretary and did a lot of research on, from the Tribune and the papers in the area is Paulette Horatio. Paulette's at the back, I believe. Paulette? Now, there are three people here, the lady of the paper. The Grand Prairie Herald, Tuesday, April 18th, 1933. The Pipestone Creek store on the Wapiti is open and is doing a very good business. Mr. Watts, the owner, hopes to have a post office in connection with the store in the near future. April 18th, 1933. That were introduced earlier today, but I'd like to recognize them again. The farthest travelers to this, as far as I know, Stephen Fox Revitt and Gordon Asquith. I saw them here earlier. Stephen and Gordon. At the Pipestone Creek School. And she is here tonight. Sonia Layla. Sonia, where are you at? Sonia was a teacher in 1949-1950. She said that there were no stories of her was such a good kid she didn't want to talk about anybody. What year was that? That's going to be the same year, 1933, May the 8th. The new store in Pipestone is doing a roaring business these days. After the rain on Sunday, everybody is wondering when they will start seeding. On Friday, Mr. A.K. Watts made a business trip to Grand Prairie. Seen and heard, Ed Woods is looking for 2 gallons of oats. Wapiti Buckaroo is chasing horses. Colin Jebb sporting a red shirt heading north. Harold Hosker wading on his knees in water with a fanning mill. And we hear that Bob Shaw has a new cook. Edgar's leading a 6 up around the corner. And Mrs. Osborne is out hiking. Right over here, Mrs. Osborne, will you stand up, please? There's some other people that were full-timers, and we'll have some things for them later, but right now I'd like to recognize them. Jack Penny, 85 2 days ago. Jack Penny. And Gladys Hudson is 85 today. Here's another news flash. Mr. Watts of Pipestone Store and Woods of Wembley had a very narrow escape when the latter's truck turned completely upside down on the turn coming into Wembley with 1.5 tons of supplies to the store. Beyond a severe shaking up and some minor injuries, neither party was any worse. Years ago, in my young days, there was a saying, when anybody continually had narrow escapes from violent end, that so-and-so was born to be hung. We don't know if that applies to A.K. Watts, but he certainly shaves the edge. He has been tangled in the gear of a bad runaway. A few years ago, a train hit him, wagon and team. It would have knocked an ordinary man straight into the lap of St. Peter, but he only had the wheel of his wagon smashed. Now he turns upside down in a truck with the wheel spinning in the air, sitting serenely in the cab. And instead of having his 5 flowers, he's calmly tending to business in his store. This I do know. Next time he climbs into Edgar Jebb's car when I'm in it, I'm going to climb out. Members of the Paul and Mark Smith family, I believe that they have something they'd like to present. Wedding anniversary on the 12th of July, and I believe the family has presented them with a cake. We can't do this. And that went all around the room, and nobody could do it. I wonder if anybody here can do that. Anybody like to volunteer? Lita, why don't you come and do that for me? Try it. Do a little. You can do this.
He can do little, who can do this.
No, you didn't do it. Sorry. Is there anybody else?
Walter.
Remember that? Would you like to come up, Gerald? I think Gerald has something he'd like to do.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much for asking me to come up. I didn't realize that my brothers had set this up that I was to do this. But on behalf of my brothers and their wives, it's my mother's 85th birthday, and we have brought a cake that we would like to have cut and everybody have a little piece of it. It's really a pleasure to be able to all be here together with all the people and all the friends that we grew up with to celebrate my mom's birthday this day. And I guess when Richard was mentioning about people that have been here a long time, I remember one time Mom and Dad stopped in Prince George to visit, and I asked them what they were doing. They'd been down in the Okanagan for a few days. Dad said, well, I sold the farm, and he said, we're just, your mother wants to find a place to live in the Okanagan. So I said, well, where have you been looking? He says, oh, we were half a day in Vernon and a half a day in Kelowna. And I said, well, you can't find anything that quickly. He said, I know that, but Mom doesn't. And he said, we're not leaving Grand Prairie. So anyway, happy birthday, Mom. And let's hope you have lots more of it.
Happy birthday, Travis. Again, I'd like to wish Jack Penny a happy birthday. He was 85 2 days ago, I believe it was. Jack, would you stand up before? A.K. Watts was a business visitor to Grand Prairie last Friday. Bert Osborne leaves for the mountains on May 12th to look over the wild game and secure pictures. Bert has a splendid collection of wild game pictures taken by himself. They're well worth seeing. He and Mrs. Osborne were busy putting in their garden until stopped by the rain. We have a few stories or anecdotes, some other people that may think of some. But one person who told us a good one about stealing chocolate bars today also said he had one more that he was able to tell. Victor, Alfred, where are you at? Victor.
I said as I walked up, I like that mystery. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I'd like to thank all the people that was involved that put this whole thing together. And not last or least, Mrs. Ellen Watts and her two daughters, Patricia and Joan. Thank you, everybody, for the hard work and the effort you put in this. But today, when we were down at the store there, I happened to notice an old washboard out there, and it reminded me of a story. I heard this story down in Arizona last winter. Now, I want you to understand this is no reflection on a hairlet, but this hairlet hired out to the New Blue Cheer Soap Company as a sales rep. And they explained to him he had to go house to house selling. And he went and knocked on this door, and the woman answered. He said, good evening, ma'am. I'm your New Blue Cheer Soap rep. He said, I'd like to come in and demonstrate my soap. And so she said, well, okay, come on in. He said, now I need 2 pails of water. So she goes and gets 2 pails of water for him. He said, in this one pail, we put the New Blue Cheer. And he said, now I need a piece of your clothing. He said, could I get your brassiere? So she goes and gets a dirty brassiere for him, comes back. He takes it and he said, you dip, dip, dip in the New Blue Cheer. You dip, dip, dip in the water so clear. You bring it to your nose and it smells like a rose. She said, well, that's great. He said, no, 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 ma'am. I want one more piece of your garment. Could I get your nightdress? So she kind of looked at him and thought, well, what the heck, okay. So she goes and gets it, and he takes it, and he said, You dip, dip, dip in the new blue chimney. You dip, dip, dip in the water so clear. You bring it to your nose, it smells like a rose. She said, oh, that's great, I'll take 2 boxes right now. I said, no, 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 ma'am. I want one more piece of your clothing. Could I get your dirty underwear? So, she thinks, well, I don't know about this coyote here, but okay, she went and got it and come back. He said, you dip, dip, dip in the new blue chinner. You dip, dip, dip in the water so clear. You bring it to your nose and it dip, dip, dip. I think I better put this back over the ridge again. Let him carry on. Well, this isn't really, this is the true story. It's to do with Dad and our sister Verna. The Watts girls will remember from where we lived at Pipestone Creek and where they lived, out about halfway between us in the middle of the field, there was an old green. And Verna, my sister, had walked over to Watts's, and the thing she didn't know was the dog followed her over there. And she was scared of the dark anyway, so she started walking home. And all of a sudden she heard this panting behind her and a noise, and looked, and the only thing she could think of was, there's a wolf after me. And she took off running. She come home that quarter of a mile, a little over a quarter of a mile, and flew through the door and told Dad a wolf was after her. And Dad, don't go on, there's no wolf out there. No, yes, yes. And so Dad said, well, satisfied you. Said, he just opened the door and he said, you know, and you could hear Dad tell the story. He said, open the door, and there the old dog was sitting out there panting away. It was the dog she'd heard. And so then whenever he told the story after that, he said that Verna went and broke the dog. He was no good to go get cows after that. There you go, Victor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Victor. Thanks to our researcher, I have some more news briefs. This is Thursday, January 18th, 1939. Kicked by horse, little girl has narrow escape. Pipestone, January 15th. Patricia, known as Pat, 5-year-old daughter of Mr. and Mrs. A.K. Watts of Pipestone, was kicked in the face by a horse on Friday last. Carl Brooks was watering his team on the Watt farm, and several of the Watts horses, which were loose, began fighting, and the little girl was kicked during the melee. Brooks picked up the little girl, who was unconscious, and carried her into the house. In a few minutes, the injured child was being rushed to Wembley, where she received medical attention from Dr. Carlisle, who found no bones broken, but one eye and her face generally badly swollen. Later, the little girl was taken home and remained in a semi-conscious condition until Sunday morning, when she revived and is now making favorable progress towards recovery. It is not yet definitely known whether one eye is permanently injured or not. Patricia will be confined to a dark room for some days. That she was not killed is a miracle. And Pat is here tonight, and I think her eye's fine, right? Would you like to tell us about that, Pat? Well, if Pat won't come up, then I think her sister Joan will. Joan had some, maybe Joan can tell us about that story. Joan. I keep wanting to call her Billy, but her name is Joan.
No, actually, I can't tell you about that story because I was pretty small. And anything I do have to say is so well laundered after the last speaker that I just, it may be boring, but I guess my first memories of Pipestone Creek were of the old store where I was born, and I actually took my first year of schooling because we didn't have a school, so I took correspondence, and Pat was taking correspondence in grade 3 at the time. And I think I remember the first time I ever saw Richard. Well, probably wasn't the first time I saw him, but the first time I remember seeing him. His mother brought him down to the store one day, and I wasn't taking my correspondence course that day, and there was this little boy about my size standing out at the corner of the store, and, you know, we're sort of standing one foot like this, both of us, you know, waiting for something to happen. Eventually, I think we started talking about, gee, school, you know, maybe we're going to get to go to school, and the next year we did. In the fall, school was open, and Richard and I were both there. And we went through all of our public school together for grade 9. And he went to London and I went to Vancouver. So, and I went on from there. And I thought a couple of years ago, I heard that he was mayor of a town in Ontario. And I thought, boy, you know, here I went to school with this guy. This is really great. And he informs me today that this is not true. He was not the mayor of any town. It was a big hoax. So I'm really pleased. But anyway, I have memories of a lot of the people here. That I think about 75% of that first class in Pipestone Creek are here tonight, and it's really fantastic. It's just been a great time to meet all these people again, and then to find that there are children and grandchildren and sometimes even great-grandchildren here as well. It's really grand, and I'm glad to welcome you all, and I hope everybody has a great time, young and old alike. Thanks.
Thanks, Joan. Just to elaborate a little bit on Joan's story about her and I going to school. We went to school from grade 8 to grade 9 together, and going back to the old one-room school today really brought back memories to us. And every time I get in an argument about education, I am all for the whole one-room school with about 9 kids in it. Because literally, they talk today about no grades in the school. We probably didn't have any grades. Your grades would depend on how far you could get in your arithmetic book and your reader. If you could go to grade 3 in 1 year, go, and then go to grade 5 or whatever. Or you just kept moving along. It was hard to tell what grade we were in. They'd ask you, and you said, well, I don't know, I'm in grade 2, and I'm grading grade 3 work on grade 3, but I'm reading in grade 2, and so on. So I think the old one-room school was pretty important to all of us. And actually, Joan mentioned the 75%. Now, I hope I can remember. The Alfords were here. I believe were they at the first school, first day? There was Russell and Victor and Vernon were there. John White was there. I know that. He was there the first day. I was there. Joan was there. Pat was there. Who else was there? Oh, Ray. How could I forget Ray Osborne? Ray. Ray Osborne is here. And Ray, I'm going to get you to tell me a story yet tonight. I always remember Ray because Ray used to ride up and down the hill on a bicycle. And he always had one shoe that had the sole wore off. And what would happen, he'd go down the hill on the bikes and his brakes wouldn't work very good, so he'd have to stick his foot in the front wheel to keep him going too fast. Yeah, those school days were pretty good. They were pretty tough too, you know. We used to have to walk to school in the winter and then in the summer. Most of the time in the summer, an awful lot of us would go to school in bare feet. And it was a long walk to school. Everybody had mentioned today that everything is much smaller than we remembered. You know, we walked to school 1, 2, 3 miles. It seemed like 5, now we found out it was only 2. And I did a little, well, we always said it was really tough, you know. I had to walk to school 2.5 miles, winter and summer, uphill, both ways. That was pretty hard to do. Rod Giroux asked me if he could have a couple of minutes. No, where's Rod at? Rod's taking the pictures tonight. Rod, come up, please.
Thank you, Richard. Now, to start with, these t-shirts that you see with the Pipestone Creek store on them, we ran out, and anybody that wants any, you get a hold of me later, and I can take the name and address, and we'll make them up when I get home and send them to you. But other than that, after being in traveling to quite a few different countries around the world, and everybody, all the Canadians say that, oh, you go to Europe, there's so much history and so much heritage, people's heritage there, and you look around here, and just the stories that we've heard today, the Europeans and other people have got nothing on us other than a few centuries. I know we've got all these people, the pioneers, and people like you that have made this country what it is for us younger people and the generations to come. And you look at your Pioneer Museum in town there, and that is probably one of the nicest setups that I've seen anywhere in my travels, and you all can be really proud of it. And I know I am, and I haven't even lived here for the last 25 years, but I still consider this my home, and I'm really happy to be part of it a little bit that I have. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mark. As Rod said, it's not the buildings and the trees and things, it's the people that make the place great. And I'm sure the people, and that's why we're back here tonight, and that's why we really enjoy these things. I have another flash from the past. This was dated Thursday, September 9th, 1937. The Pipestone Creek General Store and home owned by A.K. Watts were completely destroyed by fire on Tuesday forenoon with contents. The family were away at the time. The fire was first seen by W. Hosker and two of his boys, who immediately went to the scene, but the fire had made such headway that nothing could be done. On the same paper, along the Wapiti column, the A.K. Watts store sustained a heavy loss early Tuesday morning when his home store and post office were completely destroyed by fire. All the valuable antiques, library furniture, personal effects, and a complete stock of general store goods were consumed. The piano alone being saved, it being in the barn now for dances. Mrs. Watts and children had left for the prairie as A.K. was prepared to have the house and store completely renovated. That was Thursday, September 9th, 1937. And there's a person here tonight who, not sure if he knows he's going to have to come up tonight, but he helped build the original store. He started to work for A.K. Watts in 1933. Gordon Wagner, where are you at? Gordon? Yeah, Gordon's back there. I think he can tell us some real old stories. He worked for A.K. for several years. Came back later and farmed in the Pipestone district, east of the store.
Thanks, Richard. I started to work, I went down Watson. I started in May when Mr. Watts started the store. I started working for him. He had too much work to do in the store, so he hired me to work on the farm. And, And I was the one that hauled the first load of flour into that large store that he had now. It was a warehouse at that time, built by Mr. Jerome. Rocky Bill's son. Oh yeah, when I was working for Mr. Watts, there was a little girl that used to come out and meet me in the yard and lay down, and I would swing her around and around. That happened every day at noon, and lots of times at evening when I came for supper. And that's used to be Billy. That was Joe. I don't know what else to say. But I worked for an awful long for several years. I really enjoyed the dances that they put on there. Lots of people come up from around Prairie.
Thanks very much, Gordon. Gordon Gordon has got lots of stories, and I said, Gordon, just come up and pretend you were going to tell the people just like you told me yesterday, and he's a very interesting man. I think Frank Stoll said he might have a couple of things about the store, the district that he could talk about.
I think I pretty well blew my wad this afternoon on Pipestone. Anyway, I would like to say thank you to all you people for coming. Thanks to the committee that did such a lot of hard work. All the different people had their little jobs to do and they were done very well. Feel bad about the rain down at Pipestone Creek Park, but I think things will work out a lot better this way. And Victor was telling quite a few stories a few minutes ago. I have a little story to tell. I think maybe you might remember how the roads used to go. You know, you started down at Osford and you worked your way up where Vic Alford and Edgar Jeff and those people lived on that place, and over the Watts, and then go up to Bill and Bill Schmitz and back and forth through everybody's yard all the way to town. Well, Ed Woods was going to town one day and he went into Wapiti Bill Hoster's yard. He said, you know, Bill, I got a real sick sow at home, and what can I do about it? Like, there was no veterinarians around or anything. And Wapiti Bill, he was thinking for a little bit for a while, and he finally said, you know, maybe if you gave her a shot of turpentine, it would smarten her up. Like, so Ed Woods went on to town and came back home and brought some turpentine with him and gave it to his sow. And about a month later, he made another trip, stopped in Wapiti Bill's yard. He said, you know, Bill, he said, my sow died. Wapiti Bill said, so did mine. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for coming.
Thanks again, Frank. I think Frank was always good for his story. Now, I know there are a lot of other people here that have thought of things that have happened around the district, down at the river, up to Pipestone Creek. Is there anybody else that I missed? I tried to catch a few people, but I would like to just leave this mic open for the next few minutes, so just feel free to come on up and I'll give you no more than 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes, I think it's the limit. Who's the first volunteer back in there? Remember, there's a few of you back there. I said if there was no volunteers I was going to call on, you know, you better be ready. There's one person here tonight that not a person, but a little story that I can remember. We used to gather down at the Wapiti on the ferry. For some reason or other, that was the focal point. And there was we'd swim there as kids. We were all sitting on the ferry, and I think it was a church service, I can't remember. There was some little gathering formally on the ferry. And I was sitting looking up. Everybody else had their face to me, and I was looking upstream. They had their back upstream. And I saw this little girl laying in the water. And I looked, and I was probably 8, 9, I don't know, not very old. And I thought, gee, she's sure small to swim. And the little girl actually was drowning, laying flat out, floating in the water. I thought she was floating that way. And I think Bert Osborne or somebody hollered, hey, grab that kid. And everybody made a mad dash for this little girl and grabbed her. And immediately slapped her in the back, and water come flying out. She started crying, and I believe that was little Joel girl, was it? Gloria? Gloria girl, was it? Is Gloria here tonight? Okay. Gloria? Sorry, I didn't know you were drowning, but that's the way it goes. I mean, I'm sure there were just dozens of little episodes that you can remember, and fortunately somebody else recognized it as you were going. Pat survived, Gloria survived. People fell off horses, got run over with wagons, got chased by cows, got in the pig pen, played with the sheep. All kinds of little things happen. One thing when you're on the farm, there's always never a dull moment. There's always something running over you, running into you, or you fall off of, it seems. Now, where's those people back there that have these stories to tell? Well, I'm going to start the music pretty soon then. And who else have I got back there? There must be some more McAllister stories here. There's a lot of McAllisters here tonight, but I think there's got to be some McAllister stories. We can't let them off. I see McAllister's name in the paper here several times back in the 30s. Hauling grain, cutting hay, going to town. You remember the old barn dances down at the Watts place? I can remember those. I'll tell you a funny story, and this is a story really on my mother. I think she'll forgive me. I've told it several times before, and my dad. In those days, they used to hold the barn dance, and all the ladies would sit along the side with the kids. The kids go to the dance too. Never heard of a babysitter. And all the men would stand at the back of the hall, and I don't know why they stood back there, closer to the beer, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, they'd stand at the back of the hall, and the music would start, they'd all rush out and start dancing. But anyway, I was sitting with my mother and my brother, Cecil, with Mrs. Pitchko, and about halfway down the hall. And all the men were standing back there, and all of a sudden, out of this whole group of men, there was a guy came flying, and it was Dunk Bumstead. And my mother said, whoever's fighting back there should be thrown out. And it was my dad that had hit Dunk Bumstead and drove him right out in the middle of the hall. So you never know. Never know. Okay, now who's got no stories to tell? Anybody else would like to express their appreciation or thanks anybody that I've missed? I may have. I tried to cover the committee. But again, we thank the committee and all the people involved in this event this weekend. And so with that, I will relinquish this microphone and say thank you very much, and I hope to visit more with you this evening. Thank you.
We're in the shade, it's not going to work.
I think it will.
True.
What's your problem?
He has this thing for young boys.
Oh yeah.
You
stud
Yes, Brock.
So how far did you get with that
Hi,
girl
guys.
last night there?
Brock.
Brock?
What? I saw you in the bushes with that girl.
Yeah.
Who was it? Tell me that.
Should Luke be a girl?
No, Luke is a boy.
Throw it in the garbage.
Yeah, throw it in the garbage and then.
Now put that in my pocket, Let's shake it up some more, Jennifer.
Orange You want to bet if this is like big time?
That's the best visitor.
Hey, do you want to know about Jennifer?
Why do you think
Wait, my mom?
Okay,
Oh, that's wonderful. Do you enjoy it? Well, because it's from BC there, right? And everyone was there. And Danny, Jeff were there. And my other cousins were there. Tons. And then all the kids got bored because they had...
I asked your mom if you have all your cousins. Oh,
No, we don't. We only have him. He's the only cousin from BC we have.
I'll ask.
Ouch. Honest, that's true.
That's
Even
a
though
stamp on there.
I know. I still up.
Are you a stamp?
Where you adopted me. Oh, good. Good, bro. Let's get Jennifer on the fitness trail.
On the fitness trail?
My arm hair is like sticking to this stupid chair.
Oh,
Someone help me turn it upside down. Oh.
Me.
Right? Because they face. Just because they went on 1 year in a row doesn't mean they're ever going to win.
Oh, it's still dirty.
Yeah. Oh, they're good now. Oh, I lose. Oh, I lose. Man, LA, right? Wrong. Why should I? Cause. If you go home, you're gonna get folded up in that chair and you'll be crying to mama. Are you taping this?
Uh-huh. Told you to jump off a bridge. Did you do it? Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I watched Trey Dennis. Legs McAllister here. Legs Junior and Legs Senior. 25 seconds.
This is a rodeo event.
Jason.
A what event?
No.
What?
Now, Jennifer.
It's fun. This is just boring.
So is fitness.